Nishma Chaim ben Yisrael Tzvi. So we're continuing our series on differences between mitzvahs ben adam lamakom and mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveiro. We know, besides the different categories of mitzvahs aseh and mitzvahs ros aseh, there's also categories of ben adam lamakom and ben adam l'chaveiro. So we started discussing last week some nafkamina, some practical difference lahalacha. So we pointed out, number one is bracha. We know there are many different types of brachas. There's birchas ha-mitzvah, birchas ha-nenin, birchas shevach v'hodah. But regarding birchas ha-mitzvahs anyway, the Gemara tells us you make them ola l'asiyatz, and the Gemara Msachem. We usually make a bracha before a mitzvah. Certain times, like the case of a ger, where you have no choice, you make it afterwards, and the different brachas, some in the middle, some before, some after. So the Rambam writes, one of the fundamental differences between mitzvahs ben adam l'makom is it comes with a bracha. Not all of them. You have to, when a ben adam l'makom doesn't have a bracha, you can ask why not, and then you have to come up with an answer. But a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro, according to the Rambam, by definition, Chazal never instituted a bracha on mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveiro. So when we go through different mitzvahs, let's say, which involve people, and let's say it's unclear, let's say Kedushin. Well, on one hand, it's a commandment ben adam l'makom. On the other hand, it's a chassid and kala as well. So we know from the fact to make a bracha on the Kedushin is an indicator that at least Kedushin as the institution of marriage would be a mitzvah ben adam l'makom. And other brachas that we don't make, any other mitzvahs that we don't make a bracha, which involve people, so according to the Rambam, could be an indicator that it's a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro. We'll go into more another time in terms of the definition between the two. But that's one difference we discussed, was the bracha. Another one was the mitzvah of tshuva. As we know, tshuva is usually a private affair, and that's a mitzvah ben adam l'makom. However, the Mishnah tells us in Yuma, however, when we're dealing with someone else, if you didn't keep kosher, you were machal Shabbos, so then that's between you and God, unless of course you gave the treif to someone else, or you caused someone else. But generally it's a mitzvah ben adam l'makom. But a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro, let's say you insulted someone, you caused harm to someone, so as the Mishnah tells us, you have to actually go over and ask them. And we went into last week a whole discussion. It's not enough just for the person to be mochel. You know, he said, Ribono shel olam, I'm forgiving you. But there's a special chiyuv on you to go over and ask, even if you know he already forgave you. And that's how it was Rav Hutner, who actually he explained the machlokes Rabbi Selevan in the Chafetz Chaim about if someone insulted somebody and they don't know you did, and now you want to ask mechilot, you have to go into the details, you have to tell them. So obviously, the Chafetz Chaim claims it's Rabbeinu Yonah. What can I do? It doesn't really make that much sense. But Rabbeinu Yonah says that if you look at Rabbeinu Yonah, it's not as strong as the Chafetz Chaim writes it. But Yisrael Salanter says it doesn't make any sense. By one harm, you're going to cause another. But basically, Rav Hutner's Yisod was the reason why you have to go to someone, even if they did forgive you. Like with Rebbe, in the Gemara, where he went to the butcher, and he went ahead and he wanted the butcher to ask him for mechila. He already was mochel him, because what Rav Hutner calls to remove the heter tarumas. That based on v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, not only do I have to love my neighbor like myself, but I have to be an ahov. It works as a two-way street. I have to make sure everyone loves me. So therefore, if I did something wrong to someone, it's my obligation, even if he forgave me, to take away any type of tiny he might have. So we went into that last week. So so the difference between a tshuva ben adam l'makom is a private affair. Tshuva ben adam l'chaveiro is not necessarily public unless you do the crime publicly, but at least there are other people involved. And then we discussed the issue of spending money on a mitzvah. We all know we just got a lulav and estrog we did spend money on, perhaps a sukkah, the actual sukkah, and even hiring someone to put it up if you don't do it yourself. Tefillin, towels, a lot of mitzvahs are very expensive. However, the halacha is it's part of the obligation. Not only are we obligated in the mitzvah, but if we don't have it, and assuming we have the money, we have to go ahead and spend our own money. The obligation is when it comes to mitzvahs ben adam lamakom, the obligation is we even have to spend money, our own money, in order to be able to fulfill the mitzvah. You know, there are different gedar of how much and when, but we have to have an expenditure of money. Masha'en kain, with the exception of tzedakah, which the whole purpose of tzedakah is taking your money and giving it for tzedakah. With the exception of tzedakah, is a general rule, but adam l'chaveiro is something where you're not obligated in spending the money unless there's no other option, but you're obligated in the service, like the Gemara talks about in Kiddushin regarding the mitzvah of kibbud av v'em, mishel lav or mishel ben. Who's obligated? Where does the money come from? So yes, Be'ikar Adin we pass to mishel lav, but if the father doesn't have, then obviously the son could, put his part in tzedakah. But a fundamental difference is, in general, you don't have to spend money. Of course, that if you, in the case where you are spending money, that's midin tzedakah. It's not out the ben machaber. We'll go into the differences between tzedakah and chesed as well.
Isn't that something that would be like kibbud av v'em? You're not supposed to count it for it, but maybe it counts. Must be technically stuck.
The Meiser, you mean? But in general, that's the whole discussion of tuition and depending how. But
by that, specifically in terms of kibbud av v'em, not even tuition things, but if you actually are spending money on kibbud av v'em,
it can count for tzedakah, you mean?
No. The Indian is it can count for tzedakah, but you shouldn't count it.
That's right. I mean, but the general plow is, anytime if you're obligated in doing it anyway, then it's a general rule. It doesn't count as tzedakah. So therefore, if you assume you're not obligated to spend the money, and your parents need the money, so then, Pashas, it should count. But maybe saying going, but as a general, that gets into buying svarim. There are other things where, strictly speaking, it's not. There are different priorities in how to give tzedakah, which is a separate share. But bottom line, Meikar Adin, there are many ways that it could count to for tzedakah, for your meiser and all that. So that's another one, expending money. Another one is the mitzvah nitan v'mechila. Can I be mocho the mitzvah? Could I forego the mitzvah? So pashas again. If it's a be'edan l'makam, you know what? I'm mocho. No tefillin today. No Shabbos this week. No kosher tonight. Then obviously I'm not the balabas. It's not. I can't be mocho, and therefore mechila doesn't really make sense. Something which is nitan to mechila on a mitzvah adam l'makom. However, the mitzvah adam l'chaveiro, so there's a lot of discussion then how much. There definitely is a concept of mechila. The question is how much. So we once discussed in the past a famous machlokas. I think it was the Minchas Chinuch, and Rav Moshe and Rav Zevin about. Could you be mochel even that someone could hate you? In other words, how far does it go, your mechila? Could you be mochel? Because Rav Zevin wrote in one of his more lighter svarim, he wrote on when there, something, I forget the name of the sefer, but it's a small sefer. It has a lot of interesting shtickles. One, he has goes through all the machlokas and Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, explains the yisod. So one, I think, is called Mishpat Shailak, where he basically talks about the Shakespeare story, but he says, what happened if they went to Beis Din? Could the person give the pound of flesh, assuming the person wanted to? So that's the springboard. He goes into a whole discussion, how much mechila do I have? Do I have a right to have someone destroy it with micha? Rav Moshe has different shuvas saying in different direction if you can or not. So we definitely passing like Rav Moshe. It's just not clear which psaka of Rav Moshe. But that's a whole discussion went into another time with the father at the son's a dentist. Could he do the surgery on you? The whole issue of maka avavimo. If you don't pay money, is that considered like no one else is around, etc. So there's a general issue we assume when it comes to mechila. So be'adam l'chaveiro, you have what to be mochel. But when it comes to be'adam l'makom, so you can't. So that's the Gemara's discussion about, let's say, Kfura, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, regarding Kfura and Hesped are giving eulogies. That's the whole discussion. It's a whole discussion in the Gemara, but the simple reading of the Gemara seems to even qualify it more. They discuss, can one be mochel? One say, I don't want to be buried. Could I be cremated? So we all know the halacha is that it's prohibited to be cremated, either halachically speaking, as Rav Chaim Ozer points out, because you're mevatel the mitzvahs aseh kfura. Even if you took the ashes and put them in the ground, that's not you anymore. So therefore you're mevatel the mitzvahs. Of course, if a person, people who were burned in the Holocaust and they were found, or I think there was a mice where they found a bar of soap which was clear. So obviously, out covered hamesh, you're going to go ahead, or someone gets burned in a fire. So of course, you're going to take the ashes out covered hamesh and just put them there. But strictly speaking, that's not kfur anymore. That's not you. And the al pi hashkafa they point out is because that was during that time anyway. Whether it's still whether the theology still applies. Some people just do it. Maybe environmental. It's cheaper. But the old school, the reason when Chazal, or I should say the Chachamim, spoke very against cremation was basically that was the philosophy of it is the end. That's it. The end of this world. You close up shop. You take your ashes, put them in the ocean, and that's it. It's a denial of the next world. That's why the Chachamim spoke very strongly about cremation as a theology because of that. But al pi halacha, it's you're mevatel mitzvahs aseh of kfura. So let's say a person says, I don't want to be buried. So normally it's mitzvah kayim divrei hameis. So we show them it's very hard to explain to people today. We live in a society where that's the number one in all the medical issues. The number one priority is the autonomy of the person. You have to respect their wishes. It's hard to explain to a secular Jew or anyone in terms of how not to, even if the person said I wanted to be cremated, whether try to explain to them in a way where really it's against halacha. But either way, so that's the good discussion in the Gemara, and also by eulogy the Gemara has a discussion. So the Gemara seems to say it depends if the mitzvah is kavod hameis or kavod achai. If it's for kavod hameis, so in theory then, so if the person doesn't want it, then he has the right to be mochel. If it's kavod achai, so if the reason why you have to be buried or the eulogy is for the living, so then he has no end of the discussion. So we assume halacha on a eulogy you can be mochel, and except if you're a talmid chacham, then they don't listen to you, or a gadol hador. But strictly speaking, you have a right to be mochel. Say I don't want a eulogy. However, by kfura we assume we assume you don't have a choice on the kfura. But the Gemara we see entertains the issue on the kfura, and again, so the assumption if it's a ben adam l'chavero, so we understand why it's nitan l'machila, because that's something that. Then within that, it depends on if you're the balabas over it or not. So they point.
Who has the chiyuv? Who has the mitzvah? It's not the person who dies, right? It's the other people.
Right. Well, he has the.
So he's being
on the crew, on the son or on the kruvim, they have a chiyuv to make sure that this person is buried.
So he's being mevatel somebody else's aseh, right?
Right. Well, I mean, obviously he's meisim chashim in our mitzvahs, right? But in terms of, what if he has a mitzvah to be buried. I mean, not in the sense of mitzvah, meaning he's not getting the schar. It's a chesed shalom for the other people.
So he's preventing the mitzvah. Well, let's say there's one lulav and esrog in town, and I destroy it. But I did my mitzvah somewhere.
It was your own, you mean?
What?
You destroyed your own lulav and esrog?
Okay, it was my. I shook it and then I destroyed it.
Right.
Was I mevatel nase?
What?
That other people can't shake it?
No, it wouldn't be. No, you wouldn't. It's not your chiyuv. It's not your responsibility. If it would belong to the rabbim and that, then maybe we could talk about it. If it's your personal daled minim, you don't have a chiyuv that everyone else shakes.
So why is that different here?
So here it's a personal chiyuv that affects you, because the Gemara over there discusses the same issue. What's the purpose of the kfura? Because the purpose of the kfura is that you get a kapara. That's why, really strictly speaking, like in Eretz Yisrael, you bury someone directly in the ground because it's a mystical concept, whatever it means. But the quicker the body decomposes, the quicker the kapara. So in a sense, it's also it's hard. As you're saying, you can't say you're chayiv in it because you're dead. Meisim chashiv and mitzvahs, but the kruvim have the chiyuv kfura, and even though it's kind of like Kofadas Hachol Marotza, even if the person says he doesn't want it, but it is something that every person wants. If they knew exactly what it means to get the kapara, and that, right, so along those lines they say. But strictly speaking, it's not, it's the...
I just want to understand, clearly he's frustrating the mitzvah, it's not going to get done. But is that called being mevatel mitzvahs aseh, and if it's not, then why can't he do it?
No, right. The question was what.
I'm sure you're not going to get any credit.
Right. I mean, right. I'm saying right, because according to Rav Chaim Ozer, who say right. The question is why you mean? I guess when he's ordering the cremation, he's alive. So if he instructs someone to do the cremation while he's alive, and then he has the chi of kfura, so maybe he's learning like that. Rav Chaim Ozer right there. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying. Well, but one of the mitzvahs, I guess it's a good question. Exactly, what's the parameter? Exactly, when does it go? When does it leave your obligation? Like we have.
I mean, it's quite a stretch from the pasuk, right? The pasuk is kavod t'kverenu.
Yeah,
the basement.
Yeah, kavod t'kverenu. It's talking about mitzvahs basin, and then they'll leave from the double echelon. We extend it that the second when you take him out of the special. Kfura he's in, then he's even, and then he's like everyone else, and then right, the second Kfura, right.
And now you're going to say it extends even to the guy himself.
Right, I'm just saying no, so I'm saying according to right, I'm just working with Rav Chaim Ozer, so if he's assuming, that's what he writes, that he seems to say the person's mevatel mitzvahs aseh Kfura, so he's assuming maybe at the moment when he was alive, so I guess you're right, if someone just got cremated, like he wanted to be buried, so then he's not about the I think the Rav Chaim Ozer is learning the Chaim that when the person instructed someone, that's the issue in terms of not doing it.
A person who was chayiv.
Yeah, in
It has
terms
to be a person who was chayiv.
Right. I mean that. And then the question, who's chayiv if the kids aren't here? No, right. It's good. Right. It's like me. Like the question, the whole discussion exactly at what point does it turn over? Who's the chayiv on? Like, is the chayiv on the child or on the father? Then it's all minchas chinuch on it. And what happens at age 13? Is it paka? Not so. Right. I mean, it'd be a good question. Exactly. It's hard to pinpoint at what point. But that's based on Rav Chaim Ozer. That's what he seems to be saying. But you're right. Technically speaking, once the person's dead, he's not about to any mitzvah. He must be saying b'chayim when he instructed the person to do it, or simply, that's what the Gemara is talking about over there, actually. The Gemara is talking about while you're still alive, you're telling a person, or at least you wrote that stuff up before, you're telling the people that you don't want to do it. Right, but yeah, right, it is. It's a little different than the classical where it's under your domain, right. But either way, that's the general klal. That if it's, so therefore, let's say by kibbud av v'aim, which is our example of both a mitzvah ben adam l'makom and a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro, because on one hand, it's like the Gemara says, our parents and God we have three creators, and also we also know that there's an element of shibud that you get your parents a cup of water. So that's what the Sefer HaChinuch points out. There's an element of karas tov, which will be a separate topic. Priyas chov. In other words, you owe your parents. There's a kind of indebtment. There's a ben adam l'chaveiro aspect, as well as hukush kavu l'kvod shamayim is a ben adam l'makom aspect. So the halacha is can a parent be mochel? So we all know the halacha. Of or a father or mother can be mochel on the kavod. Bizayon, that's a separate question we'll get into, but they can be mochel on the kavod. So bishkom, if you hold as a mitzvah adam l'chaveiro, so then I understand they can be mochel on the kavod. If you assume it's a mitzvah adam l'makom, so how could they be mochel on the kavod? So that's what the Mefarshim point out. This isn't the classical mechila. Based on Yerushalmi, that what does it mean, the mochel? Let's say you go over to your father, I want to bring you a cup of iced tea. No, sorry, I'm not thirsty. I don't want iced tea. No, I don't care. I want to have a mitzvah. The lesson of the Yerushalmi is that ritzono show adam zuli kvodo. So it's not pshat that yemocho. That is following his ratzon. It's not the classical mechil where he's telling you that you mochel from kibbud. You are doing kibbud av v'aim, but ritzono show adam zuli kvodo. That's how the Yerushalmi writes, and they quote. So it's not the classical mechila. That's why it works by kibbud av v'aim, and that's why the same issue they write. By bracha. Where's the bracha as we discussed? The kibbud av v'aim is a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro. So according to the Rambam, we understand it. According to if you assume that the emphasis is ben adam l'makom, so where's the bracha? So that's what the Rishonim point out. Others, besides the Rambam, that either that. Some say it's not a fixed amount. Like for instance, it's not the actual passing the cup of water, or driving your father to the restaurant or to shul. In other words, it's not the act per se, it's not the defined act. But others say, the Rashba writes along the lines of what we're saying is, since it's nitan l'machila, that since any mitzvah that is nitan l'machila, so therefore you don't make a bracha. And so, kind of like, like we discussed by tzedakah, getting into the issue that if it's dependent on someone else accepting it, so then you run into the issue of whether it's either it's a question how you learn the Rashi, whether it's an absolute, it's something which is nitan l'machila, it's not shayach a bracha, or the concern is that it'll be a bracha l'vatala if you actually do it and he's mochel. But so that's how they discuss. Normally a b'adam l'makom you really can't discuss it's nitan l'machila, but b'adam l'chaveru you can. So along those lines, there's something similar also, kavod abrius. That we know the Gemara says, kavod abrius is stocha, let's say d'Rabbanan. So the question is, so there's a famous machlokes. So Rambam and the Rush regarding a zaken she'enu lifnei kvodo or a chacham, and let's say the mitzvah hashavas aveda is a mitzvah hashavas aveda. So there's halacha. Let's say the aveda is in the ashba. It's in a place where you're going to get all dirty, whatever. It's not a place for someone of your stature. So the halacha is you're exempt. The question is, can you do it or not? So the Rambam says rishus. You're permitted to, but there's no chiyuv. And the Rush says it's usher to, because kavod abrius, you can't do it. So they ask a kasha on the Rush. There's a famous incident in Navi with David and Bathsheba. That there's an incident where, and it's not, this isn't a hashkafa class on how to treat your wife in a marriage. That we have to learn the sugya there and see exactly what's going on there. But api halacha, there's a whole discussion that she's upset that she thinks David is doing something inappropriate. He's dancing with the aron, I don't know, maybe his shirt's pulling out. She feels something that's not b'kavadik. He's the melech, and he's going ahead and doing this, so she's she's rebuked.
It wasn't Bathsheba, it's Michal.
Yeah.
It's wrong way.
They're all the same.
Right, so therefore they point out that what's in the kudas hamachlokes between them? So they point out is the question was, because David's a king. So the question is, we know even though Av is mocha kavod, but the Gemara tells us a melech can't be mocha on his kavod. The Gemara says som tasim, and we have the expression afilo me'apamim. That pshat is, so we see it's not so pashut he can't be mocha, because the Rambam writes later on by Morid b'malchus, by Shimon ben Ger over there, the Rambam is Rashoy. So what's the pshat? The pshat is, it's really a technicality. The Shita Bukobetzis writes, so you're right, you could be mocho, but the second you're mocho, the chiyuv kicks in again, like Hashavas Aveda, Hashev Teshivim. Let's say you have a next door neighbor who's Shlomiel or Shemazan, whichever one loses everything. You go, he drops his scarf, you go back, you return it. The next day, goes on the whole. Am I mechuyev every time, so Hashev Teshivim, so they discuss Afilo Me'ah Pa'amim. So the question here is, so the king cannot be mochel on his kavod. So therefore, the question was with Sarach Mitzvah. So that was the question, whether maybe she felt there was a bizayon or not. You say even in a case where it might be a bizayon, there's with Sarach Mitzvah. So David seems to say, the way we pass in that with Tzarach Mitzvah, we assume we're not concerned with the Bizayon, we're not concerned with the Kavod Abriyos. So the kasha is, so what about the Rush? How come the Rush says, if we see over here with Tzarach Mitzvah, without worried about the Bizayon, we put aside Kavod Abriyos, so how come the Rush says then that it's usher, that the Zaken L'Sheinu can't, he doesn't have an opportunity, he doesn't have an option, it's usher for him to go ahead. So that's what there's a interesting tshuva in the Chavis Yar, which we'll get to our distinction. He wants to make a distinction between mitzvahs ben adam l'makom and mitzvahs ben adam l'chavero. I think his case over there was, we could discuss it contemporary, whether it's true or not today, whether being a musician is a bizoy or not. Is it considered a bizayin to be a musician? But the case was over there, I think he was a rav, a dayan. Apparently maybe he needed more money, maybe he was doing a gig at a wedding, whatever the the mitzvah. So the question was, could he do it? Because whatever, we can discuss if it is, but that's in his assumption, being a musician was a bizayon. So he was discussing with the meyachas of akala. So he went ahead and he said, so the Chavis Yar said he makes a distinction between mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveiro and mitzvahs ben adam l'makam. When he's assuming that for our purposes, the mitzvah of simchas chasam l'kala, he's assuming it's a mitzvah ben adam l'makam. In other words, it's not on the specific chasam and kala. It's on the institution of chasam l'kala, like the chasam sofer writes in Parshas Emor by the kahuna. Like they discuss the case, someone walks in, and we don't know who he is, but he says he's a Kohen, so we trust him, we call him up, and then he says, just kidding, I always wanted to get that first aliyah, how it felt, so was there a problem? So he has a whole discussion, but the Chasim Sofer says, it's not a problem, the mitzvah is v'kidashto. You were giving honor to the kahuna, but we don't care. As I tell the Kohen on my table, it's not because of you I'm giving it, it's the institution of the kahuna I'm letting you bench. It's not a personal thing. And that's what more, I think that they say over Meister Rav Pam, that he was once, I guess they're having one of these conventions, or like Shirim at the Torah Badas or somewhere, and I guess he was introducing the speakers. So I think he went ahead and he was introducing Rav Berim, the one from Mir in Brooklyn, Berenbaum, I think his name is. So if you know him, he has a personality. So I think he said, I guess he's giving him praise, he's a Talmud Chacham, all that, and so Rav Berim gets up and says, the Rosh Hashiva has spoken Lashon Hara. Doesn't he know you're not allowed to give praise and even praise about someone? Because now so then the problem was when he didn't know what to do to bring up the next speaker, what he should say. So in the discussion he was saying when he was just saying about himself, someone was saying a Talmud Chacham Gadol. So at first he was bothered by it, but he said, it's not me. It's the same concept. If they think I'm a Talmud Chacham, okay, but it's covered at Torah, so it's the same time of concept. So Chavis Yar writes that by mitzvah ben adam l'makom, so then he says it's an issue. So because ein kol can cover l'rav, makam chil Hashem, that on a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro, he says. So then that's what the Rush is talking about. That you don't have to mavaz yourself for a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro, but a mitzvah ben adam l'makom, you can take wherever you want to cross the line for the bizoy, but by a ben adam l'makom, there's a higher level of tolerance and let you do a little bit more, quote unquote bizoy. So he wants to make a chiluk between by Hashavas Aveda as a mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro, so then the Rush writes you're not allowed to. By a mitzvah ben adam l'makom, so then b'makom, as they say the Gemara, b'makom chil Hashem in chok and kavol rav. In other words, when you're doing a mitzvah l'makom, we're less concerned about your own dignity. So that's a distinction that Chavis Yar makes between mitzvahs b'adam l'makom and mitzvahs b'adam l'chaveiro. But that's a discussion there. When it's something you're doing something with a bizayon, or might appear to be with sarach mitzvah. So we assume the Rambam even says that by a ben adam l'chaveiro, the Rambam says you have a rishus to go ahead and take out the Hashavas Aveda, but the Rush says no. So according to the Rush, we have a chiluk between mitzvahs ben adam l'makom and mitzvahs ben adam l'chaveiro. Another distinction,
The mechanics, right down it is when you say, I understand you say that the makom cover the ankle, cover the rav, right? That's not an Indian that there has to be a mechila on a part. It's the chiv of covet is not there. But I understood by the case by Governor Melech that he had to be Michael on his covet. Is the issue that you're allowed to be Michael on the covet, or is the issue that the covet is non-existent in the Makam Mitzvah?
Right, so that's part of the discussion, but that's what they were saying with Sarach Mitzvah. So then, there it's not a bizayon. In other words, the two ways that's it's a chakira. They discuss whether the Sarach Mitzvah is like it's a dechuya, or it's like kutra. It's like lo nemra. It's like b'makam mitzvah. You can't even discuss bizayon. I'm doing a mitzvah on makam like bizayon. It doesn't exist. Or no, there is a concept, but the bizarre.
The case of the Shabbos Veda seems to be that it was just to be muffling or covered, but otherwise it is covered. But in the case of David and Melech, was he was allowed to be muffled, or but ein chol can cover the rub, muffling chil Hashem ein chol can cover the rub. That seems to be that there is no meaning of code. So say different cases may be different.
Right, I'm saying right. The machal between right.
Well, they're also different. We're talking about a different. One is kvod malchus, the other one is kvod Torah, which may not be the same. I can hear a Sparta say that. Actually, the other way to say that David should not be able to be mochel on kvod malchus because it's to be mochel on.
That's right.
Which could also you could say that some sort of Torah.
It may not be that he has the right.
Right, the same thing they say, if it's not your Torah to be, same.
Same.
Right, but it's not right.
But it's a different.
Exactly, no, it's a different category. Yeah, no, you could, right, you'll have to machal between the
So you
two.
can be muffled,
Yeah.
be muffled is covered.
Right.
But there is the issue that we take into account. It's covered.
Right, then you draw the line, but where does covered end and where does bizayim begin? Also in Kibbutz Avim, you also have a similar concept about, I think it's a famous Maisa with Rabbi Yashav, whether it's a lach or Maisa or not, but because the whole issue about Kibbutz Avim, so actually there's interesting measures on this week's parsha, Lech Lecha, that you have, let's say you have a conflict. Kibbutz Avim versus going to Eretz Yisrael. That's how I think the Panim is a medrash over there by Avram Lech Lecha that he's leaving going to Eretz Yisrael and he's giving up Kibbutz Avim. That's a discussion. So they point out that so obviously the halacha is if you want. So you don't have to listen to your parents if you want to again, all the details make a lot of difference, but in general rule, if it involves you and it's your growth, so therefore you're not mechuyev to, they might choose not to pay for the year in Israel, but you don't have to listen to them in terms of not going. However, so this is what they say over in Rabbi Yosh, whatever he means exactly will be subject to dispute. So he writes, he says, Yima'av mocha, so then you don't have to listen to him. Aval Yima'av bocha, so if the father is crying, so I guess I'm not sure if he's getting into a halachic issue with bizayin versus mechi. So then then Toby's going to be the devil in the detail. What exactly? What point is the mochel covered? At what point is it considered a bizayin? One could raise it about calling a parent by a first name, which in certain circles is very prevalent. On the other hand, you say it's a terrible bizayin. So in other cases, you have to but that's a separate discussion. We get into a kibbutz avim and in terms of going against your parents' wishes, it's sarach mitzvah. But either way,
distinction between if it's a deraisa or derabbanan, do you get into that? Whether covered bris is dope?
Right. So that's the Gemara. Right, Gemara already assumes it's only a derabbanan. Right.
So what's the issue here with David and Melech? I mean, we must be assuming that is a deraisa.
Well, in terms of normally, it's covered on Melech here, but in terms of, and here number one, here it's a bizayon, right, of covered abriya, so you assume it's a deraisa and what, and therefore that's why you could or you couldn't.
How can you extrapolate that to Durabana?
Right. In other words, what's the only time that covered abriya is plays a role is only if it's a derabbanan. Right.
Right, the Gemara and Brachas, other place we assume it's docha,
Well, Kvod Malchus is deraisa, but did David cross the line of deraisa?
Right, I mean that gets.
I'm asking.
No, right. So that,
maybe.
Right. So going based, if we're learning along this mahalach, so then to make sense. Also, it wasn't a clear-cut case where he did something so, blatant that would, so maybe that was only a Drabanan Dika covered, based on that you'll have to say that, right, else we have to come up to another distinction. But that's the way they learn, that's the way when I saw them bring it down, they seem to learn it along that route. But right, if it's real deraisa, then you either have to say it doesn't bother, you have to come up with chiluk by your wood. Another major distinction, a very fundamental distinction between mitzvahs be'adam l'makom and mitzvahs be'adam chavero is the famous sugya of mitzvah srichas kavana. We've spoken about many times. Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, Gemara in Brachas, whether we know the machokas in the Gemara, whether mitzvah srichas kavana. As I always point out, the machokas is only post facto, not before you do the mitzvah. Everyone agrees you should have kavana, but afterwards, if you did the mitzvah without the requisite kavana, you have to repeat the mitzvah. So, That's a machlokes in the Gemara, discussion in the Rishonim, discussion in the Rambam, different places, and we gave many different shiurim on it. But the straight halacha, the psak, we seem to make the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Magen Avraham, the Radbaz, that we seem to make the distinction on mitzvah daraisa, we pass in mitzvah strichas kavana, and mitzvah d'Rabbanan we say mitzvah ain't strichas kavana. However, the Mincha Shlomo, Rav Shlomo Zalman, and many other Achronim discussed, perhaps this issue of kavana is only related to, we only find it by mitzvahs benam lamakom. When it comes to mitzvahs benam lachavero, so then there's no concept of mitzvah strichas kavana. Like in terms of, let's say, like the Gemara Chazal, the Sifri, like tzedakah, that someone's walking by, they drop some money out of the pocket, they don't even know, they certainly don't have kavanah for it to go to tzedakah, and a poor person picks it up, so the Sifri seems to credit the person with getting tzedakah. In other words, but the distinction they make is, and this is a distinction, it's not limited to B'nam L'Chavero, even within B'nam L'Makom you have this distinction, but the two aspects to a mitzvah. And the question is, what's the ikr, what's the tafel? Is the ma'isa mitzvah, in other words, is the Torah being makbid on the act? Or is it the ma'isa we're concerned about? Or is it the totzah? Or is it the result? Let's say by Shabbos. Well, sasa kol malacha, the Torah is very makbid on the act. That's why we have grama, we get into davar. I mean, you could do the act, but if you don't do it in an indirect way, if you don't actually do the ma'isa completely with malachas machshavas, so therefore we have a concept by grama, by Shabbos, so either pater or it's also d'Rabbanan, depending, and you even have by other garmi, by nezikin, you have this concept where that by Shabbos anyway we'll keep to that Yinam Machal Shabbos Min Torah, because the Torah is makbid on the ma'isa. If you don't do the ma'isa exactly the right way, it's not that the light's on, it's how it got the light on, how the thing was built, not the result per se. Masha'enkin, let's say the Rambam writes by Ritzicha, the Rambam writes, Gram Ritzicha, you label the Rotzeach. How come by Grama on Shabbos, you're not labeled the Machal Shabbos? How come by Grama, by Ritzicha, if you hire a mercenary or other cases the Rambam has, you're labeled the Rotzeach, without the Chiyah, without the Onesh, but you're labeled the Rotzeach. So that's the famous Ragat Shabbat, but others say the same distinction is because when it comes to Shabbos, the Torah is mapped on the Maisa. So therefore you do it some other way, indirectly, you didn't do the Maisa, you're not a Machal Shabbos min Torah. When it comes to Ritzicha, I don't really care if you used a machine gun, a knife, you used your hands, you choked the guy, but the bottom line is the guy dead or not? We care about the totzah. If the guy's dead, you're a murderer. So therefore, that we find it also within mitzvahs b'nam l'makom, like the famous Tamarach HaZarur writes, let's say, the issue of shlichus. So we know certain mitzvahs are nitam l'shlichus, certain mitzvahs are. Milah is a separate shiuran, a whole shach and taz about whether you can have shlichus by milah. But in general, so we know certain mitzvahs, there's a Tosas Harid that's on mitzvah shabagufo. I can't hire a shliach to put on tefillin for me tomorrow morning or to daven for me. So what's the distinction? So a whole shtickle Torah is on that. But the Marach or Zarua makes the following distinction. He says, it depends. Is the Torah mapid on the Maisa, or is the Torah mapid on the Totzah? If the Torah is mapid and I do the Maisa, so that's not nitan l'shlichus. But if the Torah just wants the result, he goes in, truma, or the other examples he gives is, so if it's something that is result oriented, so what's the difference if I do it as long as the result happens? So the Maisa, it really is not going to make, you're not bringing back your wife, your child. There definitely are your kavana, shogeg that definitely plays a role in terms of ownership, but in terms of the end result is they're not coming back tonight, so that's what it means in terms of that. We'll have to get, I'm giving the extreme, I'm going to point out there's still going to be the other side of chesed where your kavana obviously should play a role, but right now we're not on that, maybe next week's share. But the ikar is the totzah, is the result, and therefore, therefore that's why in fact some Rishonim write the reason why there's no bracha on mitzvahs b'nam l'chavero, because what's the whole purpose of the bracha? The whole purpose of the bracha, they say, the different opinions, is the kavana. So you say the bracha to have kavana for the mitzvah. But since b'nam l'chavero doesn't need kavana, so therefore it's not shayach a bracha. That's how some Rishonim write why there's no bracha mitzvahs and chavero, it ties into bracha and kavana. Since you don't need kavana, so therefore there's no bracha. That's what Rav Shlomo Zalman writes, and many other achronim make this so distinct. Even within Ben Adam L'Makom, you have a discussion, but by Ben Adam L'Chavero, the focus is on the result, and therefore it's a. So that's why that's how I explained once. I think we discussed it a couple months ago, that the issue is a famous, is an apparent contradiction. That in terms of the Gemara tells us by Atzmos Yosef, so the Gemara says that we learn out, the Gemara in Sota, other places, Rashi and Beshalach, that the Torah tells us Moshe Rabbeinu took the bones of Yosef out of Mitzrayim. Yet if you look in Yoshua, it gives credit, it didn't just say that they buried it, it gives credit to the Jewish people. They carried the bones of Yosef out of Mitzrayim. We know there's nothing to talk about. Moshe physically did it. So the Gemara gives us a klal. We have a principle that if one begins a mitzvah and one finishes it, so then the one who finishes gets credit for everything. So that's fine. That's the klal. Comes along, there's a famous medrash we say in davening, not the medrash, we say in davening, Mizmar Shir Chanukas Habayis L'Shlomo. LeDavid. So you say, so the question is, we all know, what do you mean? The Torah, the Tefillah is giving credit for David for building the Beis HaMikdash. Last I checked, in fact, David wasn't able to build it for different reasons. How you learn Pshat, he had blood on his hands, that's a separate share. But the Lamais is, David started it, but Shlomo finished it. So what do you mean? So what's going on here? How come, when it comes to Atzmos Yosef, we see it's the one who finished it. So therefore, the different ways to machalik. So one way is to make a distinction between Moshe Rabbeinu by the Atzmos Yosef versus David by the Beis HaMikdash. And in fact, the Rav Moshe has a tshuva on it. It's a Piskei tshuva that talks about this halacha l'maisa, about shiduchim. We know the halacha is, and the Ramah brings down that one should, there's an Indian, besides Hakaras Hatov, there's an Indian of actually paying the shadchan, paying money for the person who set you up. And the famous, in the Chassidus Shesvarim, they say, shadchan sheket over kesef nosein. If you left without kesef nosein, you only have shade. You don't want to start off your marriage that way. But putting Chassidus Shetorah aside, and Kabbalah, but there is a halacha, you're supposed to pay the shadchan. So the question is, normally there's one shadchan, you pay them. So they give a heichatim, so where someone set up someone, it didn't work out, then as we call it in Yeridea, they were chosev in the air. They got back together, either someone else set them up again, maybe 6 months later, 6 years, and it worked out. So the question is, who gets the shadchan's money? So that's a discussion in the poskim, because they quote the cloud, the one who started, the one who... So it depends. Would have it happened without the first one? So by Moshe Rabbeinu, they're saying it against him, that anyone would have carried the Atzma. It was a tremendous chus. That was, they say, Chacham Lev Yikach mitzvahs. Moshe was involved in mitzvahs. Anyone would have taken that schus. Except Moshe had the first option, and he took it. But it wasn't without him. A lot of people would be happy to carry the bones of Yosef out. So without him, he would have got done, job would have got done even with or without him. Masha'in Kain, David HaMelech, he's the one, his dream, his whole life, Hachasha'altem Eis Hashem. So obviously, maybe it would have been built 300 years later, but the Beis HaMikdash would not have been built at the time it was, if not David's input. So that's what they. So if it would have happened without the first shidduch, so then the last one gets everything. But if it was a combo, so then they say they share the money, maybe 2/3 and 1/3. But by Moshe Rabbeinu, it would have happened anyway. So therefore, he loses out because we didn't need you at all. If it wasn't you, you'd have 1,000 people waiting online. But the way to us, the way I wanted to reconcile them, the issue is, it's because they're talking about two different mitzvahs. That kfura is the ultimate mitzvah ben adam l'chaveiro, the chesed shalemis, and the Beis HaMikdash is the ultimate mitzvah ben adam l'makom, tefillah Beis HaMikdash. So that's the pshat along these lines that we're saying that when it comes to ben adam l'makom. So then, as we'll get into, the Makshava plays a key role. Because Baruch Hu cares about Makshava Tova Mitzaref U'Maisa. Maybe we'll continue that next week on that, along those lines, on that topic. But when it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, that's the classical mitzvah b'lam l'makom. So Kadosh Baruch Hu was interested in Makshava. In other words, he wants the Maisa, but he knows David did everything possible, and the fact that the party built you can't take down. However, when it comes to mitzvah chavero, that you didn't do it, they call it, I think, a bearish tova. There's a fly on your back, and a bear comes over, kills the fly, and breaks your back. Don't do me. You can have all the kavanas, as it says. Good intentions are the gateway to Gehenna, especially by Adam Chavero. The fact you thought, thinking about something, but Adam Lamakom, God cares about your thoughts and their count. But Adam Chavero, I don't really care what you're thinking, I care what you do. And therefore, you can think about all you want, but you're going to drop me off my bones in the middle of nowhere, in the midbar. Thank you, Moshe. You could have left me in the Nile River. So when it comes to mitzvahs Adam Chavero, the ikar is the totzah. So perhaps that's when we say, the one who begins the mitzvah and the one who finishes gets full credit. That's an Adam Chavero, where the ikar is the totzah. B'asha'in ken a mitzvah Adam Makom, the ultimate base of mikdash. So then we could see that even the beginning gets credit, not to take away from Shlomo. Mitzvah shir chanukas abayis godavet. So just to summarize, so we started discussing and we continue discussing some differences between mitzvahs ben Adam Makom ben Adam Chavero. We said that the bracha is usually a good indicator. Then we discussed about tshuva being a public or private affair. Then we discussed spending money. Do you have to spend your own money or not? Then we went into whether the mitzvah is nitan l'machila. If it's ben adam l'makam, and if you're not a baal bas, you're not going to have any power. But ben adam l'chavero, then we could discuss it. We had the issue of kavod habrias. How much kavod habrias, or how much lack of kavod habrias you have to put up for. So we said perhaps according to the Rush, there's a higher level of bizu you have to put up for a mitzvah ben adam l'makom, like with the meichas makala, as the Chavis Torah said, but by hashavas aveda, so that he wouldn't permit you as zakein shein, what they call it, to go into the ashpa. Then we discussed the issue with sarach mitzvah, with David, and in terms of that. And then we discussed the issue of whether mitzvah speaks as kavana, Rav Shlomo Zalman and others, mitzvahs ben adam l'makom versus ben adam l'chaver. We point out even within mitzvahs ben adam l'makom, you also have to make a chiluk. Some mitzvahs ben adam l'makom, if the Torah is makbid on the ma'aseh like Shabbos, but at other times like Ritzicha, so then it's the Totzah you have to know. And that's what we pointed out. That's how we ended up. Maybe this theory between Mizmor Shir, Chanukas Abayis David, and Atzmos Yosef is one's talking about mitzvah ben adam l'makom, another's talking about ben adam l'chavero. So we'll continue next week. Maybe we'll go into that issue also. We'll see a distinction between machshava tova, mitzdaraf l'ma'is, or machshava ra, Eino mitzdaraf l'ma'is is a whole, or Chaim, Klei Chemda on that, and I think we'll have another share on some more chilukim.